Spring crickets. Boing, boing, boing. Boing. Rubbing our little feet. I want to remind you here, over and over, it's not just that we're doing something, we have to do that something correctly. And part of what we do is guided by what we've researched, and hopefully pretty comprehensively. And that becomes really the dividing line, is when do you stop studying and start acting against something. And I can just tell you, sometimes you have to start fighting before you might be ready. And I've also told you, when you start doing that, and you're honestly looking for help, it really does start to show up in particular things. And there's another whole other aspect about finding yourself moving more smoothly into areas, and the help starts to show up, and it kind of guides you that it may not be something you want to do, but it's something that you're being helped to do. And that's got its own proof all of its own, that makes, like I've seen in my life, it may not be where I wanted to go, but it's where I found myself to be best placed. And this issue here, where, you know, all these years I've been doing this mining law, this broadcasting, when it was suggested that I should be getting on to tell more people about this, because I was helping so many people behind the scenes, but it was so slow. You can only help so many people that way. It's really, really, really demanding, that it was suggested to me that I should get on the air, at least to start, give people an idea what we're all up against. All those things we weren't told about. And we can go through all the discussions about why. I mean, to me, it's really water under the bridge. The fact is it's happening. There's something happening, and something is identifiable, and that something can be addressed. And unless we're addressing that something, we're crickets. And we're a little bit away from the NDAA problem. I don't want you ever forgetting about how dire we are still in this battlefield America, where they can just whisk you away. And you heard this stuff coming down from the so-called Patriot Act, P-A-T-I-R-O-T. It's not a patriot. Those letters meant something. And they kind of informed you that you were going to be there was no uncertain terms, you are the enemy combatant. Everything you do was going to be scrutinized. That you will be subject at that time, that if you were liable to a misdemeanor, now they dropped it all the way down to a misdemeanor at that time, that you would be susceptible to having your rights deprived. And now you can just exist in battlefield America, and that have globally actually, and have that happen to you. So we have to readjust, and hopefully I've been giving you the notice of that as they tell us what the notice is. I've been confirming all these notices they tell you. We call it the news, but I look at it as notice. It's just the notice you're given. And then the so-called alternative media, that's been a convolution of that really caused more trouble, I think, in some regards, at least from my perspective, in getting really out the information out that everyone really needs to act, not just act out, but to actually act substantively, right on point. So last week, and thank you for everybody commenting and returning comments to me about the couple of places I showed up on terrestrial broadcasting to try and explain the situation with that miner, Sugar Pine Mine in Oregon, and the law, just bringing the rule. Actually, it wasn't even the law. It was the rule that implements the law that I exposed to you last week was a problem. And that the crickets for us as the miners would be us listening to what the BLM or the Forest Service or whatever agency, EPA, whoever it is, what they say, and don't challenge the authority. And I exposed to you last week, I think pretty clearly. I hope I did, and I got lots of comments that I did. And then subsequently on a broadcaster in Medford, Oregon called Bill Meyer, the Bill Meyer Show. He's a cool guy. I like how he pulls his broadcast together generally. But I talk a little bit different than broadcast time. So I have not been able to work with him directly to try and bring these kinds of things out on his broadcast. But he invites me periodically to talk about these issues. And I was able to, again, in a little shorter form, a little more concise way, because of their terrestrial broadcast and time and commercial broadcast time. It's a little different. It's actually a lot different in speed. That he wanted to know, again, in a format, and I had been able to bring out to him the Blogcaster page, which everyone I hope went to and could read along with what I was saying. And he's able to, like you could, to reference that page that I make a day after the night, 2 hours after. It takes 2 hours to post it. To that you could see that black and white, which I colored red and green and blue, just for other ideas that you could see if you could pull that together. But the black and white's right there to see that this rule that's being applied on the miners is not applicable. That I tell you, this is how agency takes us down. That we, generally everywhere, do not know how to look at what we're looking at, is the notice that they give us to respond correctly. And notwithstanding Battlefield America and the fact that you could be whisked away, and I told you a long time ago, they're just not going to start doing that. It's going to come over time. It's just going to be something in the future, near and possibly the near future, that you just accept is going on, that's lawful, that people just start disappearing because they were just scum of the earth, as the government defines them, the extremists. And that'll be how everybody agrees. It'll just be something that they agree to. So until it happens to them, and then they won't have a say, you'll be silenced by your fact that you're whisked away. So in the meantime, despite that, we're still fighting on the point to try and show, and this is, again, the mining law is an interesting thing. When you get into the statuses that are involved in this, you start finding out that the government can't do what it did actually. It actually creates its own international breach by doing what it did when it went to Battlefield America. And you very rarely hear me talk about the Constitution, because it's not a question. See, lots of people want to throw this up as an issue. This is where I get my rights, and then you give it over to someone to say, no, that's not where it is. And I say, I don't even bring it up. That way it can't be commented on. You only bring up what can be destroyed by some prevailing objective notice, which I call the black and white for our purposes. That this black and white that anybody could read showed, and I explained it, again, more succinctly, I think, on Bill Myers, exactly how this 3809 rule that the Sugar Pine Mine miners, the grantees there, are being abused by. And I've said this has been going on for long years now with me and other miners. And in fact, I had a miner call me here, a grantee, I can call him that. He's also a miner. He mines minerals, but he's also got the status of a grantee on quite a few of his claims. And he had just heard about the sugar pine, and he was concerned for the miner. And so I explained to him the condition. Well, when I told him, I said this was a 3809 violation, he started laughing. He happens to be the first miner I helped to explain how these 3809s are not applicable. And he's one of the first miners that did exactly what I said. And he wrote one letter, and the BLM backed off. That's the way they ought to have done it. But now we're under a different type of campaign where they're pushing a little harder. And so you got to get a little more strenuous with your writing. The point was, he knew immediately that this was not even an issue. That it had gone to what as large as a matter as to call some outside people in to help protect a piece of property had gone way beyond, as I was telling you. So someone who is involved and knows about this knows exactly what I'm talking about, how fast this works. But I hadn't had all the paperwork last week, and not that I have a lot of paperwork now, but I was directed to the notices that were given to the miners, and I wanted to go through this just really quickly to show you how fast it is to read these notices, to show you that this really, as I said before, it's exactly what I thought it was. And all of these administrative notices can be defeated almost immediately just by looking very quickly and understanding the authorities. And I want to go through this really quickly for the first part here and just show you how consistent this is, that I anticipated that this notice would exist, that it exists this way, but they did I want to point out a very interesting trick they did. And it is, I think the miners have done this to themselves. They misinterpreted the law. They imposed on themselves a limitation that the BLM, in its evil genius, picked up on and made it sound in this order like they have no surface rights. And that was I always appreciate when someone, even if they're doing evil genius work, that they do it well. That I've watched the BLM do this to miners, and they did it again here. That it's really just an interesting object lesson to make sure that you don't get involved with something like this and go down the wrong path, and you set that path up. Now, so in this notice, and I'll have the links here in the post-production broadcaster, as well as a link over to the Bill Meyer podcast that you can listen to me and Bill discuss this issue, and I go through with a blogcaster from last week, and he reads from that, and I explain what these statuses are, as I did last week on this broadcast. I want to make sure people understand, and I wanted to be on the record, and I want to be on the record today to show I think this is a setup for a takedown. I want to be on record as to how it was done. So in the future, when the BLM tries to use this to tell all grantees that they have no rights because of what the misadventure of this mine was through its so-called legal system and the administrative system, I wanted to be on record on how it was done so that we don't have to listen to that nonsense in the future was that setup and takedown. That this notice pretty much confirmed that to me. I wanted you to know this and how this works. And you really got to think carefully about when you're dealing with an agency, because they got a bunch of real smart evil people back there thinking about stuff. And this whole thing is really coming out of Washington, D.C., for those of you that aren't paying attention to how this really is a federal-based attack that is adopted by local people. Because no one asserts the law. No one asserts actually what the law is, and they go on the administrative rule. That's, as I told you last week, and I hope I proved it to you, but the clear reading of the black and white, that this rule section is not applicable. So right off on the top of the letter, it says 43 CFR 3809, it's not applicable. This whole letter is based on this rule violation. But let's look inside the rule, because it was pretty interesting things. I made a comment last week. If they made any mention that there was some mining activity going on, that had to do with load, then they would have admitted that this was actually mineral incident use of the land. And there's nothing, even if they were, the miner is true right to impose upon himself the 55 Act, there was nothing in that act, even if you could apply it, that was to stop legitimate mining. Nothing. So that the BLM, I said, if the BLM identifies in any place that there's a mineral incident mining, their notice is no good. It's faulty at that. Well, second paragraph, it says that they had been some observations of mechanized earth moving equipment, a small bulldozer and a mini excavator, which has been used recently to bury and install a water pipe system, improve roads, clear adit entrances, and level areas for structures and work areas. Well, clear adit, the word adit is load specific. So they just agreed that at least parts of this activity is mineral incident related, but then they also produced another problem that the miner apparently, because I do not know. Again, they denied that they would not accept my offer of help, just to explain this much. But so I don't know what they're actually doing. I did hear they did file an appeal, so I don't know. I think as I told you last week, it might be the mining law will win, but because of the politics in the IBLA and the corruption, the collusion in the IBLA, and over the subject matter of occupancy, that we found from the training seminars back in, I think it was 96, that this is a plan to take down the miners. I don't know that they're going to survive this on an administrative look, which is presumed to be your due process. Anybody saying there's no due process here, that they're not getting their due process, is incorrect, because administrative procedures are presumed to be fulfilling that. So you have to attack whether or not that was sufficient. You can't just say it doesn't exist. But they all said here, if you remember, I just said that they said here improving roads. Well, did they or didn't they? That's an interesting question, and I don't know whether or not they answered that. You can't improve a road. You can maintain a road, but if they throw in a notice that you improved it, you got to turn around and say, well, how? I've only maintained roads. Show me where your evidence is that I improved a road. And you all might think that this is real semantics, but it's not. I told you the terminology is super critical here. You can't improve a road without extending into the public land, which requires you address the BLM on that. But you can maintain a road, and that comes within the grant itself of 1866 in Section 8 under the construction of the highways. You can maintain the existence of something. You can't improve it without potential. In this case, you can't improve it because it's surrounded by public land, which the BLM does have management authority and would have to be involved to improve a road. So they threw in here that this miner was improving the road, and I don't know that that's the case. I think that they were maintaining it, if I remember hearing stories about what they were doing. In fact, the clearing of the adits, that's the kind of work they were doing. They were just cleaning the existing place up, not making it better. But the problem here is it's a 3809, and I've told you it's not applicable. So notwithstanding what they're saying here, they've actually brought in out external than 3809 impositions by saying they improved the road. Neither here nor there to this point, though. This would have been a simple addressment. You say, I did not improve the roads. We just maintained them. Show me evidence that I improved anything beyond what we already had established. So if they don't answer specific to this, and if you understand this is presumed to be your due process and you don't respond correctly, it's presumed because the agency gets deference, they did it right. And so what's really caught my eye, I just blasted through this and got to the last paragraph, because this is all pretty consistent stuff for me. I've seen these letters over and over and over. The only thing that changes is the numbers and the claim and all this other thing. But it says in the last paragraph of the first page, a review of the file shows the Public Law 167 determination, go on, and a lot of numbers, denoted of the Federal Master Title Plat, pre-1955 surface rights do not exist on any of the above-mentioned claims. Now, you understand that the claim of the miner last week and through the news that these miners or these grantees, they should really change their name to grantees for this point, are claiming pre-55 surface rights. I thought this was a brilliant maneuver on the BLM side. They've just determined in this that there is no, listen very carefully what they say here, the pre-1955 surface rights, in quotes, do not exist on any of the above-mentioned claims. And I told you, that's the truth. Why is that, though? Why that is because they don't have a pre-55 related mineral that they're claiming. The pre-55 surface rights, so-called, relate to the 1947 minerals that were granted that were called common minerals. The claims that they're referring to are uncommon minerals. And so this was a brilliant statement that they're going to use to beat down miners in the future if this case goes on. And I'm hoping I'm possibly interceding here a bit, even though no one wants my help, that the record now gets made that the IBLA will be committing beyond trust breach to entertain this appeal, not against the miner, but against the BLM's own lack of authority. That it's not untrue, it is true that these claims that the Sugar Pine Mine has do not have pre-1955 surface rights. That's a true statement, but it's because they don't have the right to claim pre-55 rights. They aren't claiming the minerals that those rights attach to. They're claiming minerals, the rights of a relation back to the Granting Act, which is at least 1872, and probably because it's lode. And that cannot be extinguished no matter what the rules say, no matter what the case that bearing my name, literally my name on it, that says the 1866 Act doesn't exist. That case is a complete fraud. It outed to me the IBLA is a complete criminal, that there is no pre-55 surface rights to a uncommon mineral claim. Their rights relate back to at least 1872, and because they've identified it as a lode, we know it's actually 1866. And so what rights do those claims have? Well, every land grant has to be interpreted by its express provisions. And as I pointed out last week, those provisions, as stated, again, amending the 1866 and the 1870 laws for placer deposits and into 1872, is that the entryman there shall have, not a question, shall have exclusive possession and enjoyment of the entire surface within the limits of the claim. And so this was a brilliant move, a brilliant decision. If you were to appeal this, you would lose. An uncommon mineral claimant claiming pre-55 surface rights, in quotes, would lose this discussion if they challenged it, because those pre-55 rights don't apply to the uncommon mineral that was claimed, that the BLM identifies ahead. Now, I go to the second page, and this is where it's usually an interesting little statement. About the middle of the page, you can see, and you'll get the link to this. It says, this is what they're claiming is a stop order, and they go through some 3809 lingo that is not applicable, right? So it goes down here. What's their authority to do this? It says, under the authority of 43 CFR 3809.6, you are ordered. Well, if they don't make the record back, it says that you don't have authority under 3809 because I do not claim minerals reserved of the United States, and neither is my claim on public land. That the authority they impose is assumed to be proper. And this is how simple this could have been answered. First of all, you don't assert a right you don't have. And why wouldn't they have just asserted the better right? The one that says right in the express provisions of the grant, they get the entire surface. Why do you claim rights to minerals you don't claim? And why would you accept an authority that's not applicable? That I'm telling you, in all of your administrative proceedings, wherever, all code impositions, and this includes, I'll just jump over real quick, this includes even taxes for property. The very first thing they'll tell you that what you're being taxed for is real property, and no one says, but I don't have real property, I got patent land. It's the same thing, folks. This look and this view and this interpretation applies everywhere. So, and I just wanted to get on the record again. I now see the documents. I can quickly go through it. I won't go on and on about the pages. I saw the answer in the third paragraph of the first page. They claim the wrong rights to the unclaimed minerals, and they told the wrong. They set up the wrong scenario, and the BLM gave them the right answer. Except the BLM commits a theft by extortion where it doesn't actually state the answer for the miner so that he is protected, because the BLM is an interesting position. They're not just a sovereign's agent, they are a proprietor. And they're making a claim as a proprietor, not the sovereign. But as a sovereign, they had the duty, the obligation and duty to protect this miner from the entry, and they should have said that the pre-55 surface rights do not exist on any of the above-mentioned claims. Rather, the rights under 1872 is amending the 1866, where this claimant shall have exclusive enjoyment and possession of the entire surface, is the rights that we will honor. The failure to state, the omission to state that law, is a theft by extortion under state law. And that this was done, if I interpret this as a mailed document, this was done by the Federal Mail, I assume, I'm looking at effective date of delivery. I assume it came, certified mail. I'm sorry, it's right there on the top of the page. All you got to do is read the stuff, folks. It's right there for us. That's mail fraud. That's a scheme and an artifice through the omission of a stated fact. They had the duty to say so to defraud someone of their property and affect what you see. The outcome that you see originated from this fraud to interpret and grant the grantee the rights that he had granted to him relating back to the Granting Act. This is on the BLM again. I can just point this out. I told you that last week. I got it clear here today with the paperwork. And when they did that, they had a scheme and artifice under federal law. You got them with the state felonies. I also, because there was a use of paperwork, there's actually felony coercion underneath state law. I now have the state law felonies to go after these people in state law, under state law, and they have the federal law violations, which now extends. It keeps going on, and I'll just throw one more out there. There's this law, and I think it's 18 U.S.C. 1346, and don't pin me down. Just put in honest services in 18 U.S.C. and it'll pop up. They're supposed to treat you honestly, and when they don't, that's another felony. I told you this last week. There was a different way to handle this. That it went here was a serious problem. The miner, in a way, is not at fault at all. But because of the politics, this should have never been a political condition. The law ought to have spoken immediately, and when it didn't, the sheriff ought to have stepped up and made it speak by arresting all those that were interfering with the producer. You have to understand this condition. The producer is not a commerce entity. These land grants are not commerce related. They're not real property. They're patent lands. They're conveyed lands by grant. And when they come, there's no political power within these people that own these sufficient to protect them other than the law. And as we have on the Jefferson Mining District website, and somewhere in the pages, probably at the bottom, one or so, we have to stop politicizing property ownership and production. And this is what you're seeing here. This is a political hit on a grantee claimant who doesn't really understand how he's supposed to address this. And having to address it, they don't even understand as an irreparable harm. And I'm saying this because if all this was placed in the first letter in January, they would have established a much different record. In fact, they get to the point they don't even have to go to appeal. They just go to the sheriff and say, I need you to arrest these trespassers. Now, I'm hoping there's coming a day that all these so-called law officers actually step up into the law. I really do. We would end this, was be peaceful. We would have to stop this, what BLM incited into insurrection of requiring the Oath Keepers to step up and walk over and say, listen, we now understand what our oath meant, and we're gonna protect this property until someday due process. Folks, they don't even understand. This is not a judgment. This is just our ignorance. Nobody understands there is no due process available to this miner, because what was done was an irreparable harm crime in the first instance that needed to be arrested. That would have been the due process. Now, what they now force the miner to do is select some kind of a remedy for himself. And he's doing it without knowledge, without preparation, and he really shouldn't had to, because he's supposed to be protected by the law. He's just supposed to be going to work and producing those minerals for all y'all. And myself, we all use them. As Bill Meyer just absolutely excellently surmised a sentiment that he stated at the end of the broadcast the day that I talked to him after a conversation with a caller that also did an excellent job of summarizing what this whole issue is about. As Bill Meyer said, we are all miners. And I can't tell you how profound that statement actually is. Whether you're a miner in the front end digging the rock, or you're the one by consumption using all the minerals that miners, wherever they are, produce. We are all mining. We all need that mineral. We're all miners. And then we have the bigger, deeper, we're all properties. We're all property owners at some level, whether or not you consider yourself a property or not. You know, people can be considered property. You better own up to that, and you better start seeing the significance of what I'm talking about behind the woodshed about property, and how what this does, when you have an administrative agency coming after you, how easy it is to show they don't have authority, that when you didn't do that up front, you come to the time in the day when all of a sudden now everyone's questioning someone's right to stick a gun in someone's face, even though that never happened yet. But then we get the talking heads, the national broadcaster talking heads saying, characterizing this as someone sticking a gun in someone's face, instead of focusing on the law. And then they work off their beliefs and their opinions. Absolutely an insult. In so many ways. I don't want to get started with it, because this week I was so insulted I got started, that I don't want to do it on the broadcast. To me it's self-evident that we have a long way to go. These talking heads that are a national syndication really aren't doing anybody any favor. And so now I understand, in my mind, it just turns into all this is, and we all know this, but now you see it firsthand. It really strikes home. I can't understand that it's not controlled opposition. When you hear the answer and you deny it, and then you go on and say what you believe and feel, opposed to what it should be and is, and make determinations for someone without title to the land, and you say what ought to be over what they have to decide in the moment while the guns are on them. You know, understand, the BLM is sitting there, they're going to come and torch their cabins. If there's ever been a question about that, please do not have a question about the fact that government comes in and burns cabins. I don't get out much to say it. I'm going to get it on the record. It wasn't our cabin. We got to it after it was burnt. The claim that we have had a miner run off of it back in the 80s. And then again, after the burnt biscuit, they torched these miners up the creek that we're on. And they burned all the cabins out. The Forest Service did this. And then they did it again under an excuse to backfire a monster fire, and the backfire never reached the monster fire. So this is all a methodology that they use, and I'm sure they snicker at this. They think it's funny. They're killing people, they're killing their property, they're killing their ability to make livelihood, and it comes under some color of some authority, and this is where it starts in the imposition of these so-called rule impositions that I explained to you are not applicable. They said under the authority of 3809, they are demanding that these miners, these entrymen, these grantees do this. And no one said, but wait, that is no authority. And that, as quick as this answer really is, ultimately, is that 3809 is no authority. So you are just admitted to be a trespasser, and I can show that that's felony, where you did it under a color of authority and then harmed me. And if this would be, I guess again, I'll just repeat it one more time, that would make a wholly different record. And actually what it makes is a proof in the record when they don't answer that condemns this whole process immediately. that when they don't do that, I'm telling you this was a setup for a takedown. That the attorneys don't do that, I'm telling you they're not capable. They may talk behind my back and say that I don't know what I'm talking about. They may call me names. But the bottom line is, I think you understand, it's not so hard to understand that if they're not doing this as simply as I'm telling you, then there's a problem. And the problem is the minor, the property owner, the man or woman with the property wherever you are is accosted by whatever trespasser under whatever color or none and does not know how to respond without an attorney, an attorney, without a professional coming in between you and your rights. And once we get this situated in our brain, we will be tossing these people out. We did. The Jefferson Mining District did. We still have to affect the enforcement. That's a more delicate condition. We're infiltrated and surrounded. It's not an easy problem to address when, they're the ones with the massive firepower, and we were supposed to be ruled by law, not led out of the barrel of their gun. That I've chosen to take this more peaceful route to try and show all of us we have a better thing to do, and we have a needier thing to do to expose the criminals in the offices as we can. And hopefully give us the awareness we lost to bring us back into a day when what we thought, this representative form of government, worked locally, and we have the local governments protecting us, not using us as some kind of fodder for revenue enhancement. Which you'll hear everybody, even the guys, the people that I see doing presentations on this public land stuff. It's all about, well, we got to get revenue. We got to get revenue. No, you misinterpret the whole thing. You've convoluted the problem, and you've actually trespassed the obligations. This public land issue is supposed to be disposed to the people for production. In fact, the New Mexico versus United States 1978 case tells us that all these amenities called animals and wildlife and other things, tourism, and those are all fine. Congress agrees that they're legal. In fact, they made the Multi-Use Act of 1960, not the 1955 one, but the 1960 Act, the actual Multi-Use Act. And the 1978 court case says, though Congress said those were lawful uses of the public land, they were not prevailing uses of the public land, and the prevailing uses of which are mining, agriculture, ranching, grazing, water for use for farming. All these things were production related, not commerce. And remember this is serious. This is a serious dysfunction that we don't understand. This is where the attorneys think they've got a hold of us, and they just might because no one else knows to say this stuff. But they put everything, this corporate structure, that we can find certainly in the same state here, in the state side. The state that now follows the Model Business Corporation Act, and it says so in the statute. Again, I try not to make any of this stuff up. You can go find it written everywhere. But wherever any of the stuff I say, you should be able to find written someplace as the objective basis from which I'm telling you that this corporate structure state that was created since 1953 in this state it requires that you file an application into it, and it has no jurisdiction outside. That's why they're pulling everybody into that commerce. But then that's also, as I've explained to you, that's a federal surrogate. The local corporate state is a federal surrogate entity to the federal. And what flashes in my mind to remind you, if you haven't seen it, go see Clint Richardson's Corporation Nation. It's a whole other veneer that they've created. And that's what I've learned to identify. That's what I've learned to show that you're separate from. And additionally, now we get into land law and land use and your use of your own land, and that's land disposal law akin to productive uses. And the best use you would have right now is that you live on it and you bring it into any use. If you can find the originating grant, you'll find that was the originating purpose that was prevailing for you. And no state or federal or government, legislature, judiciary, administration, agency at all can interfere with that. Now, they'll tell you different, but I know different than that. And I think my view has been shown to be more substantive over 10 years. And you have to understand that, I don't know if people appreciate that there's not many people I don't care what kind of a lawyer you are, if you call yourself a lawyer, an attorney, that has been focused on this. In fact, every time we bring up patent law and we bring up the substance of this mining law, we find very quickly that there's nobody actually capable. And you'll know that, and I figured this out as well. If you go look at the continuing learning education of the Bar Association, you will not find mining law. You will find administrative law relating to mining, but you will not find mining law as a jurisdiction of knowledge that's trained into these bar members, which are just legal professionals, like hairstylists. You want a hairstylist dealing with your property? Go call a bar member. That's the extent of their knowledge. It's all administrative, and that's the extent of their training. It's all administrative. And when you look at what an attorney does to your case, they mess it up administratively. That's why I'm telling you I have a severe problem with what I saw coming down, that the record wasn't made right. It's like cha-ching. I mean, it's the money machine. Now, if they don't do that, they get to run this thing, they get to run the miner right up into the Supreme Court, and he'll lose there. And she'll lose there. And a co-grantee of mine in Jefferson sent me a court case, and the first thing that I noticed was that the miner did it wrong, and the court came up with the right answer. And so the miner loses because they didn't do it right. They actually should have been protected, but they weren't, because the court's not there for that. Because people don't understand the most basic problem, and the worst problem is that they don't understand that there is no justice. And this is not just an opinion. There just is no justice, because these courts are not courts of justice. They're not courts of competent jurisdiction. They'll claim they are, but we can prove that they're not, and we have the lawsuit to prove that the federals are not. And by the fact that the Bar Association was a defendant to the case, and they did not respond, they defaulted. Their whole existence is a crime, is a breach on your existence, and yet it forms everything you think about. It's going to eventually form the support, the aiding and abetting of the felony that's against these miners here. They simply could have shown that there was no authority under 3809. The notice tells us how to answer this pretty simply. So, brilliant though. I have to point this out. You have to understand the brilliance of what they did here. They claim in this first order that the pre-1955 surface rights do not exist on any of the above-mentioned claim. That's brilliant, because the BLM is correct. Those load claims are not 1947 claims. They are not common mineral claims, the 1955 act of which required some action for those surface rights. They are not common mineral materials that have the question as to surface rights that they can make a pre-55 claim. And so the BLM answered this exactly right. The other problem is now, if the BLM is determined without an appeal that they don't have surface rights, then why is the grantee, the miner, claiming that they do have them? I'm telling you that they don't have them. I said, but here's what I also said. It's irrelevant, isn't it? Because their rights relate back to 1872. They, in fact, have no surface rights to claim under 1955 Act. Their rights come from 1872. So, and to quickly say again, it's an fraud by omission for the trustee overseeing these minerals for the grantor, Congress, to omit to say where the miner's surface rights are. And so I've just informed you also how I know this is a corrupt condition, that they want your property rights. Because if they admitted that on this decision, they would have had to leave the miner alone to go back to his work, admitting that they have surface rights, and it would destroy everything they've been working for to take away those rights. And yet, the sheriff believes that the process that his deputy served in furtherance of this felony was proper. That sheriff doesn't know the first thing about due process. No disrespect, again, it's not a judgment. We need to up our game on what we know due process is. The Oath Keepers are protecting a due process that can't exist in this case. and yet the miners are engaging a process that's presumed to be the due process that would comply with Fifth Amendment. They've got us so screwed. The government and the attorneys and the agencies have got us so screwed around. And worse, it's this consensus alternative dispute resolution mentality. It's a law that's not a law. It's outcome based. They keep telling us what it is. This is what you're looking at here. Most people don't have a clue that they're up against this to even address it. That I will tell you the answer to it, the antidote, is the assertion of property law. And holding on with both hands and clubbing anybody who tries to come and take away that from you in the form of, as I've found out in the last couple of years now, and getting very confident about it, and it will be asserted at some point. Somebody's going to be asserting this. I'm on record. As soon as if there's any BLM comes around me, I'm going to be arresting them for felonies. They've got that on the record. They've had it on the record for 2 or 3 years at the state office. I don't get out much, but if that day ever happened, they try to get in my face, I'm going to arrest someone for a felony. At least one. If it's not me, the record is made that anybody can actually do it when they're accosted by somebody from the government agencies that don't have jurisdiction or authority actually. That's that felony. So, I wish the miners would work this better. That's not my call. I am on record and wanting to tell you what this is so that in the future, if it does go wrong, see, I hope they prevail. I hope that the IBLA changes. I hope it becomes lawful. Even if they're afraid that they've been found out and it becomes lawful, I don't want to see any miner hurt by any reason. And if these miners win, if you can say this is a win, after having to do all this, if you call this a win, this is why they call it irreparable harm. This can never be a win. But if they are not set against, and this decision is made in the future in their favor, contrary to what I'm saying today, I'm fine with that. But I'm going to be on the record in case it doesn't. Because the mining law, the grants, the way this law comes out, all these grants, it'll protect even the biggest fool. It may not protect a damn fool, but it'll protect a fool. Because the law speaks, not how much you know your law and your rights and whether or not you're an attorney. The law is supposed to speak for itself, and we're missing that. I don't need an attorney. I don't need a lawyer. I don't need a judge. In fact, all the judge can do is affirm the fact of what I just said. They don't have any authority to come contrary to that. They have every authority to affirm it and then condemn who tries to come against it. And when you're not seeing any condemnations, you're looking at a judiciary that's working in complicity, in concert, as organized criminals in collusion to divest people in this nation of their property and their rights and their right to use their property as granted, which means typically without much reservation. In other words, as long as you're using the land lawfully, there's not supposed to be all this criminal imposition that's, you're doing this commercial act, so we get to regulate. That's a crime. That initial imposition, that initial notice is a felony. And as soon as we as a people understand how fast this works, I think we're looking at the day when we're starting to roll in the right direction. Until we continue, as long as we continue to be the 100th monkey problem, we don't understand that we have a right to assert in the first instance on our own, independently of everybody else, we're going to be treated like the animals that the federal statutes say we are, that I've talked about over and over and over. Again, it's not my opinion. I'm as shocked as you when I hear it. When I read it, I'm even more shocked. I'm stunned. I sit there and my mouth opens up. I say, wow, they do treat us like animals. And that day is coming. We can be, continue to be the 100th monkey, or the 100 monkeys working 100 years to be able to accidentally type out the works of Shakespeare, whether that'll do anybody any good. But it's coming. These people that treat us as animals are going to now bring us in. It's going to be interpreted as that we're all animals in this planet of the apes that we are allowing to turn on us and let these people be the keepers of. And we got very close this week. I don't know if all y'all, how many heard this. I haven't heard any talk about it. A judge actually, in her initial order, gave chimpanzees human rights for the first time in history. believe this or not? I was sitting here and I didn't know, I was speechless. Literally, I sat here and I looked at this title. I could not believe it. I looked at the date. I thought it was going to be April Fool's. It's not. It's April 21st on the story here. A judge gives chimpanzee human rights for the first time. Well, the little monsters that humans are, I've already gone through that definition. Please don't be humanized here, but this is what this law does as well. For the first time in U.S. history, a judge has declared that a pair of chimpanzees held at a university research facility are covered by the same laws that govern the detention of humans. Humans, effectively rendering the animals as legal people in the eyes of the law. New York Supreme Court Justice Barbara Jaffe said that the apes held at the Stony Brook University for the research purposes are covered by a writ of habeas corpus, a basic legal principle that lets people challenge the validity of their detention. Legal principle, folks, that was supposed to be a constitutional right, unless stolen by the government by insurrection. See, what they give, they take away. But this was astonishing to me. I didn't think that they would actually get it out, that they were going to give chimpanzees, apes, rights like humans. So I'm like Mr. All Resistant about how did they do this? How did they do that? Well, there was no really reason at the point of the first story. Well, quickly within the next day, we got the update. Judge didn't actually mean to give human rights to the chimps. Previous landmark ruling was a mistake. Well, was it a landmark ruling? I don't think so, but folks, the first Twitter that went out based on the first one, I said, this is the Planet of the Apes, and they've just done it. And when this one came out, I said, this is testing. That was a seed drop. This is coming, folks. They haven't yet been able to justify this to most people, and so this was just to push it out there. There's been 4 other courts that have said this is not the possibility, and I can just tell you in law it can't be. Let's move it on out of the human and into man and woman. Out of even corporations or people too. See, when they make these inanimate fictions, anything can happen, folks. If you don't understand how close we are to this being actual law, that an animal can have rights. But when they get even to the word person, that person is a man or woman or even a legal entity with obligations and duties. Absent the obligations and duties, you are not that person for that subject matter. And I could say that for the mining law. Absent the status of claiming the public land claim, the miners were not the person liable and having duties underneath that law. They're not the person, that mineral person. So there's a fiction created to attach the laws. See, your flesh and blood is literally separate. And we continue to allow it to be connected, that they can make a fiction, they can create anything they want out of this fiction. They are trying to tell, and this is, again, there's some people, lunatics, that are asserting this to push the envelope. And I'm going to tell you, with this new type of so-called, the new term is coming out now. It's actually been around for a while. I've been researching it for about 2 or 3 months. It's the same thing that we sued to enjoin. So we're right on target with it. But if you've never heard of it, it's called reflexive law. And it's no law at all. It's just the outcome-based nonsense. That these people that run this, these groups that are running this, run reflexive law in to get these determinations, and they're going to find someone eventually that's going to pull this off on the fiction that an animal has so-called human rights. Now, the judge did come back finally within 24 hours and say, "Oh, that was a mistake. I wanted to do something else." But I understand the way this works is that this is a test. And I was pretty adamant maybe we shouldn't go there. That's really not a good thing. And, as I'm always trying to figure out, what are we doing here? What's the future going to hold? Maybe I don't have a right proper interpretation of what's going on. Let me entertain their thought. I'm beginning to believe maybe we should give animals rights. Maybe we should give those. Why don't we go ahead and give the chimpanzees, the apes, rights? I mean, this is the Planet of the Apes anyway. Why not give them rights? I mean, we'll treat them like disabled people. And we heard when the budget thing was all come flying apart that the government makes actually GDP on how much it expends. So why wouldn't we want more people on the government dole, since that raises GDP in this debt-driven evil condition? that I'm almost thinking maybe, yeah, let's go ahead and give a monkey, give an ape, give all the animals rights. And let's subsidize them. Just treat them like disableds, because that'll raise GDP. And then I was reminded of a story a long way back that proves that apes could actually handle this. You give them a food card that they can go to the store and they can get bananas with it. This would work. I think this is a great idea. Maybe we need to give apes rights. Monkeys learn to use money to pay for sex is a study that was done in 2005 to tell me that monkeys are capable to do what we little animals do ourselves. That I think extending to them welfare, Section 8 housing, mental help, we'll have to have whole transportation systems set up to handle the onslaught of animals having rights. That this research at Yale, which did a study back in 2005, made sense to me. I think we need to go there. We need to actually give these apes rights. We need to put ourselves onto the track that the movie told us we were on quite a few decades ago. But the study on teaching monkeys to use money to buy things like grapes, jello, and other things, it turns out once the monkeys learned they could buy things with money, they started paying female monkeys for sex, who in turn immediately bought some sweets with it. You little monkey people. I think this is brilliant. I don't know why I was so resistive to the idea. Monkeys are people too. They encourage the first business, the oldest business in human history. Immediately, when given the method to do so. Didn't even take 100 monkeys. It just took a little encouragement. So I'm wondering, well, I think I've been wrong. I think we should go ahead and give those apes the rights, and I think we should give monkeys the benefits of the United States government and raise our GDP. I mean, whole industries will be developed underneath. What kind of job you'll have? You love animals? Here, the rats will have a complete rights, a complete run of the cities. They'll have rights too. When I heard about this story about the people who were suing to take the monkeys from the university under writ of habeas corpus and force them under the provision of, we got to free the monkey, that it has rights, that they wanted to force them into a sanctuary, I'm almost thinking I need to intervene to tell them both they don't have the right to tell where the monkeys can be prisoned. Neither one of them have a right if the monkey has rights of habeas corpus. He's to be set free. Or she's supposed to be set free as an obligation on the public. What right does the so-called helpers of the animals that think that they have a problem with the university holding the monkeys? What right do they have to dictate the chimpanzees, the apes' living situation? If in fact the ape really has the right of habeas corpus to rely on. No, I think I'm going to champion this. I think we need to give every monkey the right of self-determination. I think they're capable of doing what people do, where they can already get the money they need to go buy the sex they want. They know how to go to the store, apparently, to buy their bananas. They can traverse the trees. They don't have to use the roads. If we put trees close enough, I think this might be a great idea. And, it all helps the GDP of the nation. I'm beside myself of how ignorant, how resistant I was to this brilliant idea that apes have rights too. Speaking of apes and monkeys, monkeying around, I'm not in the political side of this too much. In fact, I try to tell you, I only identify politics as much as it tries to interfere with production. And that's the felony when it does that. But someone who listens to all the congressional criminals that are around, and I don't have any. I'm completely inert to all these people. I could care less what side of the fence they're on. To me, we sued them. We sued the political parties, and both parties failed, and they both admitted to committing treason, essentially, and utilizing something called sustainable development to do it, an international imposition, totally contrary to the property obligations of the United States of America and the states. That there was this people monkeying around over there in Congress. There was somebody reading a statement from him, an action from him. I outed him, like we tend to out these congressmen and senators for they say one thing and then they don't do really much more than to just talk, you Americans. Talk, you America. Remember that one? What was that? What was that movie that they did for that? Was this one?
Shut up, you American. You always talk, you Americans. You talk and you say, let me tell you something, and I just want to say this. Well, you're dead now, so shut up.
Dead?
Dead. Shut up, you American. You always talk, you Americans. You talk and you talk.
You talk and you talk. And this is my thing. You can talk and talk, or you can go do. But Trey Gowdy was outed for making a huge mistake as this story reports that he just made in discussing something. And I'll read a little bit of the story here because I think the guy was right on. And this is what we find a lot of. When they don't do something, when they resort to some failure, some excuse that makes them impotent, you need to focus on that is that it was a fraudulent excuse that they're trying to use to avoid a greater disclosure. On Wednesday, Mr. Gowdy, on Wednesday you stated that Hewitt's radio show that Congress didn't have the authority to subpoena the server Hillary used during her terms as Secretary of State because House rules do not provide for that authority. House rules don't provide for that authority. You, sir, have just admitted that you and the rest of the House believe Congress is powerless and that we live in a kingdom. I'm absolutely sickened by the conviction by which you repeat this lie. I guess this is what happens when we elect politicians who are fundamentally ignorant of the Constitution, its purpose, and the power and duty it imposes upon our elected representatives. This statement is so repulsive to liberty, so abhorrent to the principles of separation of powers, and so loathsome to the understanding of the constitutional republic that any representative who believes that what you said in this radio interview should be ashamed of themselves. Alexander Hamilton said this: your conscience will reproach you for your folly, and your children's children will curse you. Why don't House rules give Congress the authority? Because House rules are invented by politicians to create excuses for not following the Constitution. Then they don't have to do the right thing. They can do the politically easy thing. Mr. Gowdy, if what you say is true, we are all subjects to the executive branch, and that means we live in a kingdom and not a constitutional republic. Sir, I believe you have forgotten that the House of Representatives is the people, and you have just announced to the world that the people of America are powerless to their government. I really don't know how to express just how despicable our Congress really has become. Here's my advice. Stop making excuses and do your job. Stop worrying about House rules and follow the Constitution. If Congress is so fundamentally ignorant as to what that job is, then all need to immediately resign their positions and attend some remedial training. May I advise you that you need to abandon your errant law school training. I know, I went there, and get some truth. Hey, Trey, I'm not a subject. And if you believe you have no power to represent us, if you believe you have no power to defend liberty, and if you believe you are powerless in front of a criminal who has participated in murder of citizens, violated your constitutional duty to the people, has aided and abetted the enemy, and should be charged with treason and conspiracy to murder, you need to hang your head in shame and turn in your resignation and go home. May I suggest you reread Article 2, Section 4. I won't continue. I think the sentiment is pretty right on whether or not it was shown to be actually proven. The point here is, and it's not mentioned much, and we found this out in 2013 when we did our lawsuit, but there is an inherent obligation and duty in every branch to check the other branch. And so when we bring up this idea of house rules, remember I told you there has to be an underlying law those rules implement to be lawful, first of all, and then they have to adhere to what the law was they're implementing. That the inherent duty and obligation, it's not an express duty and obligation, the inherent duty in one branch to check the other is the crime, the treason that these people are doing to say rules stop them from doing their duty. This is something we have to start getting in our understanding. That letter at opinion piece, which I think was accurate enough, it's a sentiment we need to start holding and putting accountable on everyone that's in an office, was written by Chris Ann Hall. That's on us, folks. If it is the house of the people, where's been the people? Where have we not put their feet to the fire for this treason that's going on in utilizing these excuses, like the BLM using rules that are inapplicable or have no basis to be applied, that we feel helpless and hopeless and we think we have a better idea than just to call them out for the criminals that they are. I guess there's as I was thinking about it, why you respond administratively is to make the record, but, I'm not into just calling anybody just a criminal until I can prove it. And there might be a mistake. Mistakes you can use. They're not executable once they're found and they can be changed. In other words, when you find you make a mistake on an application, you use that mistake to rescind your signature and making that application void from before the beginning. Mistakes are not really actionable once they're found and corrected. It's the uncorrected one that shows the intent. So you give someone a notice of the mistake and an opportunity to correct it. You give them due process back, like you should do everything. Why, I don't try to judge anybody unless if I'm thinking correctly. Give everybody the opportunity after they've been noticed to be doing wrong to fix it. And it's like no harm, no foul at some level. But if we just use that method, we would be able to write a letter. We don't call anybody a criminal. We give them an opportunity to remove the excuse and do the duty. And if they fail, then they are knowing and intentioned on being that criminal. And that's when you dictate to them what that crime was, like any other parking notice would. If you go into a parking lot, they always list all the crimes that you'll be violating, that they're going to charge you with or have you towed away with. Some repercussions going to happen. We give due process back. We just don't say you're a criminal. We say, okay, if to avoid being a criminal, show where this is not the fact. Show cause, essentially, how this rule applies where it doesn't, where it states right here it doesn't. Now, to me, that's if I can use the word civilized, that's a peaceful way of communicating with people. They can be doing mistakes. We kind of have to give room for the mistake. Nobody's perfect. Everyone, I think everyone kind of grabs that. And so we've established, and most reasonable people have established this process of our notice, opportunity, time, and place. That is what we need to pick up immediately, where in this case where Trey Gowdy makes an excuse over house rules that does not state an overriding law that it implements, so that you can measure that and put weight upon the act, when there's an inherent duty that one branch checks the other, which means that even if it's not true that he doesn't have subpoena power, there is a power in the Congress to stop that which he is looking at that's the crime, that is the extension of that branch outside of its legitimate needs and uses and establishment, that we need to focus on. And it doesn't become, if you're listening to what I'm saying here, these are 3 and 4 sentence letters long. These are like 1 paragraph long. I don't have to recite the Constitution. I don't have to stand on all the statements, and I don't have to recite any case law, which doesn't matter. It's irrelevant anyway. All I need to do is point out a connection to the one who's doing the offense and ask them if they intended that. And if they didn't, fix it. And if they don't have an idea, offer a suggestion. That's a very short communication. And I'm saying that in a way just to let you hear it if you haven't heard it before. This is not that complicated. That's what the frustration is when I hear the crickets. When I see the crickets. The avoidance, the excuse making we do over when we see this kind of an excuse. And if Chris Ann Hall does nothing more than to call our attention to it, one of you that finds this to be just abhorrent as it is, can actually do the next step that Chris Ann Hall ought to have done when she witnessed the crime. And you have to then research what the ramifications are to all this. It takes a little bit of study, but the answers are there. And I'm going to suggest ahead of time, and not to defeat you, I think we need to do this so we see that we are the ones that are responsible to stop this, arrest this nonsense, because the system will not. And the power ultimately resides in the people. You, by staying around, have agreed to be the one that has to take that on. Whether you like that or not, that's just the way that works. That's up to you all to decide for yourself. When I saw what was going on and saw how far away it was that we were being treated from the way that we ought to be treated, and then it took all these years to figure out, how do I discuss this in ways that people may understand? And in the last few years, really trying to boil it down to really simple concepts for people that show us that the answer has been really simple the whole time. When you see the harm, you got to realize that there's a cause. You have to identify the cause, give the one who's doing the action for the affecting the cause the reasonable notice, and then call them out and go for enforcement. And if the law officers in this country actually were law officers, they would recognize the violation. They'd probably beat you to their door to arrest them, actually, once you gave them notice of the violation of someone else in office. See, office is not an immunity. That the judges gave themselves immunity shows you that they're a usurpacious gang. The Bar Association is a gang, organized criminals, who marshal a military against you, and we have been crickets on that I'm suggesting to you is so easily, at least a record is so easily made for, that we haven't been doing it is a I can't call it a shame. It's a real disappointment, I can tell you that. And it's not putting us in the best position. And then because we don't do that, it's easy for the other side to vilify us. They call you names and they keep yakking because they know you're not going to do anything. The reason why the case of the Sugar Pine Mine went where it went is because the miners didn't do what they needed to do. And they expressed an ignorance to something that the other side knows to exploit. And I hope if you listen to that first part of this broadcast, you understand that wouldn't happen to me. That wouldn't happen to someone around me. We would have a totally different record being made. I'm not saying that it stops a criminal dead, it arrests them. What it does is it sets up the record that no one can question your rightful actions. Nobody can question and impose upon you their belief and opinion of how you were supposed to handle it, like is going on right now over the Sugar Pine Mine condition. Nobody would be needed beyond your own knowledge, like an attorney to represent you. Why are you representing yourself? There's a felony going on. Just arrest it. Arrest the felony, folks. And if you understood what I said about how close we are to courts giving apes rights, so-called human rights, humanizing this whole thing, that it's even in the air, shows you how close we are. That these people know exactly what your weaknesses is. Like I see the protocols of the elders of Zion, like I see the silent weapons for quiet wars. It's working on you, and it's working great. That we're very, very close to. Well, it's just going to be incremental. I can't say. You see it every day. That if we don't get beyond crickets, and I mean get into substantive action, not just any action, not just busy work, but actual substantive action that I think is really so simple. As simple as making a concise letter on point, giving the party that appears to have violated the law the opportunity to recognize that they found that someone witnessed a crime, and give them the opportunity to back out gracefully, and if not, arrest the felony. We're that close to stopping all this. Because if it doesn't, we have international evidence, as it occurs to me to think of it, in Brazilistan. We have Solomon down there telling us, if you think whatever is happening in the United States is just starting there, you got to think again. It's all this stuff that's happening here has happened in the world somewhere else, as I've been telling you. He confirms it from down there, down in Brazilistan, that in Australia, if you think that being quiet and allowing this stuff to go on is going to get better, a couple of weeks ago there was a story of Australia to authorize guards to beat asylum seekers to death. In this planet of the apes. An inquiry by the Australia Supreme Court has proposed new powers. These are the Bar Association down in Australia, folks. New powers to officers at immigration centers, granting them the right to resort to violence should they find it necessary, according to I feared for my life, according to the former Victoria Supreme Court judge. Won't read more. That you maintain your silence in this. We continue to hear the pleasant sound of the crickets, the ignorance is bliss crowd, and we are going to get this everywhere, and it's not going to be just in these immigration centers. This is, you're seeing it out in the streets. I've told you a long time ago, it became very clear to me that we all live in a prison pod, the size of which is determined by your compliance with the warden. I've explained this little process before, why I focused when they took me out, and they got rid of my documentary on the child services crime and pedophilia. All you're hearing it all now. I was doing this 10, 15 years ago. They caught up with me, and they took me out and took out my documentary and then let me go. That I realized at that time we all live in a prison pod. It's just the size of our cell, and that's consistent with how well we obey the warden. That it now allowed me to focus on the fact that we do agree we live in a prison, and I'm going to have to fight my way out of a prison that has been constructed around us, whether we all see it or not, in ways that does allow me to escape, given I have enough life left in me to do so. But that it was going to have to be a prison break en masse at some level. That I come every day, and I sit, and I do what I do, and I study what I study, and I just keep focusing on it for as much as things want to get in my face. I deal with what I need to deal with to the extent that it doesn't take me away from my prime directive, which is to expose this prison that we all live in, and how simply it is that we can make the jailbreak, to show that the authority is not. And it's so easy to do, and this is my frustration and disappointment, that I bring crickets in the opening few seconds of the broadcast. It's not 2 minutes, folks. I don't go in 2 or 3 minutes of crickets, so I'm listening to that part. I think I have something more important to say than crickets for 2 or 3 minutes breaking into my broadcast. But the point is that I know you don't want to hear it. I know you know if you're doing something, it may be an insult to you. I'm not talking to you, that's for sure. I'm talking to those that think that are us, that aren't actually finding the right they need to be made wrong. And I just talk on these things in general terms to try and inspire in you that you have the capacity in you to pick up something that's a wrong and literally make it right, and dedicate yourself to that part as much as you can, and it can be made right. That the examples of which in the world are coming down. The oppression is everywhere. It's being expressed in other places, reflected in actions of other governments that were perceived to be less open, less free than the United States of America. And that's on us. That's the psyop on us, that it starts somewhere, gets legitimized, and all of a sudden it's okay in the United States. That if people in the United States don't get it together, if they don't stop, folks, I'm not going to talk about it tomorrow. I'm not going to say much more than this. If you are wrapped up around Jade Helm right now and waiting for the next hangnail to hurt you, the next toe that gets stubbed, you're wasting your time and you're wasting everybody else's time. What are you going to do about it if it is live? Are you prepared for that? Your talking means nothing here. Your worry means nothing. Your concern means you're seeing troops. Folks, do you know that this is the time of year that the troops move, and they move into military operations areas to practice? Every year this goes on. That even if Jade Helm is live, folks, you're kind of messed up, aren't you? Why are you fretting about it? Why aren't you taking some kind of action? Why aren't you going down and talking to your local people, not as a lunatic, but as a point of the law that says, hey, you're supposed to stop this nonsense, not allow it, not encourage it? Again, this is like the fear. It drives me nuts a bit. I hear the emails come through about this fear porn stuff. It just drives me nuts. But what are you going to do about it? On the other hand, I really don't hear anybody talking about, well, wait a minute now. This guy behind the Woodshed said that this so-called chemtrails, geoengineering, might actually invoke a winter, a big bad winter, because there's some real scientists back in the 70s that had proof that we go through these cycles, that winter was coming in the 2030s. That maybe we should be preparing not for some psyop against us. The military's already called Battlefield America. I guess that's my frustration with that. You worry about Jade Helm, but didn't worry about the fact that they took away all your rights in the NDAA and then declared Battlefield America. Why didn't you jump up? Why aren't you afraid of that one? Maybe Jade Helm is probably just the extension of what you failed to respond to the first time. That's why they're doing it. My thought is, well, if you're not going to stand up to that, you're certainly not going to stand up to the reasoning and the science behind the fact that you're looking at a very cold time coming in the future. That a few years of food preparation are not going to protect you for. That if you don't get integrated locally with people in your government anyway, we're probably done for in the North. If this comes to fruition, and I'm telling you, you're looking around, and I can't disprove that that's probably a bigger threat to us than anything else. Because when Mother Nature decides to go frigid, there's no military that's going to do much. And people are dying. Not because of the military, because Mother Nature decided to go through some oscillation, and we're so fragile on this little blue marble that we forgot about how unimportant we are to the scheme of things. That we better get ourselves working together, because fighting amongst ourselves over and over is showing it's the wrong way, it's the wrong awareness, it's the wrong consciousness. Don't want to get too new age, because I don't go there. That's just not, that's frivolous as well, going that direction. We can be getting very close to be considered Planet of the Apes, and they can give these people that are in power, like the Bar Association, the seat of decision, the power to control you, and all these people in the UN to control you, and actually do things that actually hasten the destruction of the people by the agenda itself. You think that cold weather is not going to kill off all the people and get you down to the population that they want? That you just complaining about it and knowing about it is not going to be sufficient. That I know locally we could be stopping it pretty much. And as I was telling you, we have the ability as the power and the people to witness the crimes against us and make policies that'll stop it. At least to the extent that we can. Certainly if Mother Nature strikes, you're not going to do well. Your policies, your laws, your beliefs, your opinions, your property means nothing compared to what Mother Nature can pull off if she wants to shake you out. That I hear people all worried up, worked up, didn't get worked up about NDAA, didn't get worked up about Battlefield America. Oh, we'll write about it and talk about it. But they sure get all wrapped up when the military starts to move around, which they've been doing every year for I don't know how long as I've been alive. I don't know how many times as being a kid I walked down, all of a sudden there's train after train after train of tanks going down south of where we were because that was where the big military games were going to be played for that summer. This may be real. It may happen to be. It may be the concentration camp problem that we're all looking at. What are you doing about it? Yakking about it? Screaming about it? Yelling about it? Then you're not doing anything about it. That it becomes just a big noise to me. That I believe that working inside that system that I've been talking about to make linkages up with people that start to teach them and educate them to what we're really around and what's about with all this so-called legal stuff and why we have this property and how that creates some form that we end up not having when natural chaos hits us. We really have to focus on it. We want to talk about preparing. We better prepare in that direction. Now we have a better example to do, but then going to Planet of the Apes, monkey men or women, better than giving these brutes, these 80 IQ brutes, the ability to say they were field threatened and then beat you to death. There's an example. It didn't come from the United States, but there's an example of how cops ought to act. It happened in the United States, but it wasn't United States cops on vacation that made that example. That reminds me of the way I saw cops acting when I was young. That they do not act that way anymore in the mass majority. 4 Swedish cops on vacation in New York just showed Americans what real policing looks like. It wasn't treating people like monkeys or giving apes rights. It was you being compassionate to some others. 4 Swedish police officers vacationing in New York City were on the subway on Wednesday when a fight broke out. The train operator asked if there were any police riding who could help with the situation. The Scandinavian patrolmen were very soothing and non-aggressive as they de-escalated the situation instead of escalating it, the way we have seen often from our own men and women in blue in bygone times. Folks, I'll add that. But I'll send you the link. You can look at it. Absolutely what needs to happen when you're trying to what, folks? What's the whole point about what these, when you try to soothe us and not escalate a system, but you keep the peace. You return to the peace. Not use violence as an excuse to go beat someone to death because they're trying to get into your country. Or just trying to be walking down the street with a country that they're supposed to be living under protections of peace. Don't create violence to make the peace. You take an oath to keep the peace. Keep the peace. Don't make excuses that there's rules and policies that you're going to excuse yourself into violence and kill people, execute people. And this gets us back to you making those rules. Here's an example, folks. You want to get a bag of law, a bag of facts, a bag of example, you can hand somebody, get this thing and say, listen, I want your police policies. Go across this nation, everybody. Get everybody else involved. Everyone go down to their police centers and say, this is what we want as a policy writing is how the cops in this area will treat our people. Here's your example. If you didn't know about it before, folks, if you didn't know it was possible, you have it now on video. Police violated Fourth Amendment by using drug dog to prolong a traffic stop. It's now again stated and restated. As I've told you before, the detention, my free to leave, sets the clock, and it shouldn't last no longer than about 20 minutes for a traffic stop that has no other probable cause. Even and despite the fact that the cop can be mistaken in his belief of the rightful imposition of the law, they still can't hang you out while they wait for a drug-sniffing dog if it's going to take even 8 minutes. We hold that a police stop exceeding the time needed to handle the matter for which the stop was made violates Constitution's shield against unreasonable seizures, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said on behalf of the court. The ruling states that without reasonable suspicion, police extension of traffic stop is in order to conduct a dog sniff violates the Fourth Amendment. The incident surrounding the case occurred in 2002, finally getting to see all this time. Someone's rights are violated this entire time, giving presumption under the government that they did right, which is a violation. It's a fraud of omission. It's a felony to interfere with the use of the highway, given this gentleman was not traveling in commerce actually, even though he may have been duped to believe so and had a license plate and a driver's license to hand the officer when he asked. All this gets buried by this decision. The fraud that's on people to use the highway that was granted to them to use. What commerce activity is that, folks? It's not. According to the Supreme Court's ruling, an officer's mission during a traffic stop should include deciding whether or not to issue a traffic ticket, checking the driver's license, determining whether there is outstanding warrants against the driver, and inspecting the automobile's registration and proof of insurance, and because it does not have the same, quote, close connection to roadway safety as the ordinary inquiries, close quote. Letting a drug dog sniff the vehicle is, quote, is not fairly characterized as part of an officer's traffic mission. Let me go back up and just do a connection for you. This is all based on being a close connection to road safety. You want to tell me what a driver's license has to do with that? Actually? What does proof of insurance have to do with road safety? Isn't that after the fact? What does an automobile's registration have to do with road safety? At best, that's just a property notice of who owns the property. Has nothing to do with safety. So what are they actually talking about? Is that these are the elements that constitute the proof for someone acting in commerce and brought themselves subject by the filling out of an application and asking for that to be put on them. These have a close connection to roadway safety. I'm asking you, what about this is actually helping roadway safety? What, that you can steer a car down the road safe? That you get your license, supposedly that's supposed to prove you can go down the road safe? Really? You know how to drive on the left-hand side of the road correctly? Like, don't? You think that's what the driver's license is about? No, the live driver's license says you agree and understand to these rules and you'll follow these rules because you've asked for the permit, the license to do so. License under state law is permission to do that which is otherwise illegal. What was illegal about lawfully using the highway granted to you for your use? Does anybody think about this stuff? I know I do. Does anybody? This is all administrative imposition as well. You understand that this comes out in an administrative hearing as well, on the record. Don't expect justice, but you got the record. I want you to read these stories. They're very important to identify very powerful things that once you understand to read this and you realize, wait a minute, that's not me. That doesn't do that. It means something else other than what I do. You're now on the path to freeing yourself, to freeing your mind. This is all close connection to roadway safety. None of the things before that I read in that list of those things that an officer gets to do in a traffic stop. Trafficking, folks. Trafficking, I've said this before. It's trafficking stop. None of those things is actually relevant to safety unless you've agreed to by the application of the license. And that code, motor vehicle code, that you live by because you applied it to you, the application. You filled out an applique, you stuck it to you. That this court case does not mention that other side, does it? Maybe it doesn't have to because The parties went in with an attorney, and they offered that the administrative imposition was accurate, and so they had to follow these things. And the cop is given carte blanche to do what he's been trained to do under commerce. Am I telling you that if you argued what I'm saying, and it shouldn't be an argument, made a statement of fact and presented the lack of jurisdiction of the court, you think that would be a silver bullet? Then you're not listening to me. I'm telling you that's your best record. Whether or not when you prevail against a criminal in the black robe or in the blue suit or in the black suit on the prosecutor or the striped suit when they get you in jail, that's a whole different thing. You're dealing with criminals. It's organized crime. It's organized crime, and what I can find, because they bring revenue enhancement into the system to pay for itself, is martial law, Lieber Code. Go read it. Don't take my opinion for any of this. And yet, there's these bar members and judges that are, I think they got a conscience a bit. But one judge, listen carefully to what she says and then correlate it to what I've been telling you. Police so out of control, this judge explains how and why you should always flex your rights. Before I get down to a quick little statement of what this story says, or this report tells you that you need to do, what is my adjustment on this is that you are flexing your so-called rights, really the right to be left alone and not be subjected to this special jurisdiction, is to assert that ahead of time. You flex your rights, folks, is the right you have to avoid, not evade, avoid that authority by showing it has none on you and then outing everybody that comes contrary to that black and white statement that in the law itself says the law speaks for itself. You don't need a judge to interpret it. The law speaks for itself. The only thing is, does the record show that you're on the right side of the law? And just to jump it over, and I'm not saying this to berate or judge the other minors. Like I said, they're hapless victims of a felony in progress. That if the minors had done this ahead of time, flexed their rights to be lawful in their property and not been the possession of which has not been mischaracterized into an administrative or commercial connection, they would be sitting a lot better, and they would have flexed their rights of independent action, private action, independent of the government oversight. That a sitting judge, Justice Janice Rogers Brown, has advised citizens on how to deal with police attempting to engage in fishing expeditions. This is kind of what that dog thing was about, isn't it? They're fishing. They don't have a real probable cause. This is the probable cause problem. So they just go fishing. They get you to speak. They get you to confess against yourself. Instead of you saying, I don't have the right to remain silent, I'm asserting my right to remain silent. Go get me a real lawyer. Don't give me one of your chump attorneys. I want a real lawyer. They're on fishing expeditions. This judge says Brown urges citizens to address officers, quote, firmly, politely, and respectfully, close quote, and to exercise their right to end voluntary encounters with the police by stating, I do not wish to have an encounter with the police right now. Am I free to leave? Her quote, you should state, I do not wish to have an encounter with the police right now. Am I free to leave? This is from a judge of she's part of a 3-judge panel of the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, Remember, our lawsuit went back to confirm our default through the Federal Circuit, the National Federal Circuit in D.C. So there's all these different circuits that you got to kind of keep track of. But this is the Municipal Circuit Court of Appeals, and said that members of the Metropolitan Police Department's gun recovery unit are allowed to approach people on the street. They can then inquire as to whether they are carrying firearms and would consent to a search. While agreeing to those encounters are legitimate, Brown expresses displeasure with the situation by writing a separate concurring opinion. Our jurisprudence perpetuates a fiction of voluntary consent where none exists, she wrote. The honesty for the sitting judge, the honesty from a sitting judge was refreshing, yet startling. Well, now, I just interject. Why would that be refreshing unless they're committing the fraud of omission to withhold this refreshing knowledge that we all should have? And where this thing is, she says the jurisprudence perpetuates a fiction. Folks, jurisprudence is nothing but a fiction. So always take everything we hear with a grain of salt, but go with this one. I do not wish to have an encounter with the police right now. Am I free to leave? And you know, behind the woodshed, is that a silver bullet? No. So you're going to have no more. But she's saying, lead with this statement. I concur. She went on to write more. With the guise of voluntary consent stripped away, the reality of the district's regimen is revealed. It is a rolling roadblock that sweeps citizens up at random and subjects them to undesired police interactions, culminating in a search of their persons and effects. If the Fourth Amendment is intended to offer meaningful protection in the context of Terry stops, the voluntary consent exemption cannot be used to engage the members of the public en masse and at random to fabricate articulable suspicions for virtually every citizen officer is encounter on patrol. I'll read enough. Stop reading there. The point is, here's a link if you wanted to see how this works and what they're doing and get the knowledge that what they're doing and imposing upon you is a fiction. It's a color of law authority that I'm telling you under state law is a theft by extortion if they interfere with your right of mobility. No one brings this up. They always allow it to go to court without a record showing that there was a fraudulent imposition and a felonious imposition. The mischaracterization of what you do becomes the question now for the officer to put on the record that he didn't do. Not many people, I don't think anybody does this stuff. Now, I'm trying to explain that to you. That's what you do by administrative letter writing. That's what you're doing. What the twist is for the administrative, let's say go back to the miners on Sugar Pine Mine, they would say, your observation on our mining claim is a trespass, first of all. Secondly, your authorities are not relevant to our claim. Show cause how you have not committed a felony theft by extortion by omitting to recognize our rights. Sign it and date it. That's a letter, folks. Now you've set the record that they have to answer. If they don't, it's presumed that they didn't have it. They're trespassers and felons. Why don't we do this? And someone who comes contrary to that is aiding and abetting the felony. Then you charge them. I know it's a lot of work, but this is what happens when you live in a den of criminals that extends that kind of a theory of modus operandi into a nation. And then we hear crickets. They get away with it, and you lose because you don't step up doing the most simplest things. I've been trying here to explain and using this Sugar Pine Mine really as an object lesson. The technique is, I hope you're hearing it. It's used, I can use this everywhere through any encounter. It doesn't have to be even administrative. Now, as I told you about making policies for the police, go in there, you got this Scandinavian way to handle two people that are fighting and calm things down, and it wasn't non-physical. I'll tell you, they had to hold this one guy down. He wanted to cause some trouble. They didn't hurt him, though. He didn't die. But that's a model for you folks. You can write policies. I told you can have initiatives made, have the legislature make laws. Well, apparently someone's gotten fed up with this nonsense about cops being filmed and attacking people. Legislation that fines cops $15,000 for interfering with citizens who film them passes the House in Colorado. So there it is. I don't even know if I want to read more of this stuff. This is a model for your state, for your local area, for your county. Take this as the lead. No different as I told you, the veterans in Illinois, private citizen arrests. Getting in touch with the local officer, making sure that they recognize that, because seems to be the main problem. The law officers are not. That you set up the groundwork, the foundation that makes your point, the wrong you see right, successful. As I said, this is so much more important to understand that I can't talk about really in specifics until I find one. Like here this last week, someone had a question for me on something that they were going through, and I can only offer what I see from a distance, and I am not where you are, and I don't know your state's laws, so that all makes a big deal. But there's just certain basics that I was able on a specific thing to offer some observations, and apparently I don't know where it's going to go, but apparently it was helpful. But that's the only way I can get specific. Most of this other things I talked to you behind the woodshed is in the general. That you have the ability to go make laws that does do this. You put penalties on these bad acting cops. Now, I don't know that that's any real penalty. I don't know that the administration of that would work, but at least you are coming with the power of the people to say, we're not going to allow this to ourselves. You did not constrain your activity to keeping the peace. We now have to make loads and loads and loads of policy regulations for you and your operation, that we are willing to do that. Until such time that we stop dying because some officer makes an excuse that he feared for his life because he was so stupid to get himself in a position or felt so unaccountably licensed to execute people. Anyway, California, they're gonna send a bill. It's been adopted by the House. It has to go through their process. You can too, folks, wherever I think you are, and I've suggested over and over and over. I don't know what the answer is. There's no silver bullet. We just have to, there's enough of us, though, I'm sure, folks, to do all of this. So I come once a week just to try and throw this stuff out there. I know a lot of it doesn't make sense. It doesn't appeal to a lot of people. I know that. Don't let that be an excuse to just sit around and not do something, though. Do something constructive and substantial. And do it in a way you're not in trouble. There's nothing I'm advocating that should ever get you in any more trouble than you would be if a Guido comes after you to break your knees, or just shoot you in the head. Government becomes, protecting itself because it doesn't want competition for the crimes that it is. This should have never come here, and we did. We allowed it. I think I mentioned here a couple weeks ago that the war on drugs is like the longest running war ever. And we know these wars are created to give the government expanded authorities. And I've said you got to challenge all that. Well, now it's coming out of what all this stuff starts to come, this war on drugs. We've heard the CIA. We found out that Afghanistan is now growing like 3 times the amount of opium now than that we're protecting it. And the CIA is moving the stuff around than they ever did before we moved in there. Well, now it comes out Israel becomes a major hub in the international cocaine trade, abuse rising. The number of cocaine users in Israel has doubled in recent years, and the Israel police reports that Israeli criminals have joined hands with the cartels. Well, as long as you make your prohibition and you don't do some better issues, this becomes profitable. And then you find out the governments do it. Why? They don't get rid of the prohibition. Because it's profitable. But it's profitable on the side that allows them the funds to continue to do it outside the constraint of law, because it's all unlawful anyway. On a wall of the Israel Police Classified Intelligence Unit hangs a map of the world. The countries of Central and South America are highlighted in red. The countries of West Africa are highlighted in green, and arrows drawn the length and width of the map, indicating the drug trafficking movements, all points of one country whose name is highlighted, Israel. It should be noted that Israel has a star role in the World Drug Report for 2013 issued by United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime and released in last June. In the report, the discussion trends in the world, which discusses trends in the world, Israel is not infrequently listed in connection with cocaine. That's enough. I don't need to read more. You can read the more of this that you want. These facially apparent countries, so-called, Israel's not really, in my mind, it's a state that was imposed on a land, the title of which we can find does not exist. As a political movement can't exist, and I'm not talking about those that are believing in what we call the Jewish faith. That's completely irrelevant to this matter. I'm talking about the politics that runs in this world. That's corruption that allows more corruption. Now the players are the players, folks. That's how they got there, and we're crickets to that. Texas legislature repeals Common Core, United Nations soft law imposition of stupidity, making your little ones stupid, making them responsive to reflexive law. I can tell you that way. Tennessee legislature repeals Common Core. Needs to. Absolutely. Found out that the interstate compacts that were not signed by Congress for Common Core fees in Missouri, were unconstitutional. The same style as you're going to find the environmental compacts unconstitutional, but they still exist, don't they? We have a lot of work to do here, folks. But get your legislatures not to start up and to end what they allowed. You have to do the work to stop this stuff. I don't know when this will pop back up or not, but Tennessee doesn't allow Common Core. Big deal right there. Big deal. Illegal. Judge throws out evidence from FBI agents posing as cable guys. Was a story that I talked to you about before. I'm still a little bit interested in how that even got into the courts. And again, the judge didn't turn around and go after the FBI. See, this is again, the courts are not watching the felony going in front of them and arresting that of the government itself. That inherent obligation and duty between the branches to check the branches. Understand how powerful this is. This is not something you have to witness. Anybody who takes an oath to sit in any branch of government has the inherent obligation and duty that when they witness an extension beyond the establishment of each branch, they're to arrest it. And there's mechanisms in each one of these branches, whether I fully understand them or know them, they're there to exercise. And they're not. And when this judicial so-called officer found an executive officer violating the law, this should have been arrested. And if not, then you see collusion between the branches. Another violation. That's a destruction of your Republican form of representative government right there. And I hear crickets. Now, notwithstanding the fact that the FBI can do illegal acts when it's doing all kinds of things, FBI, big plan to expand its hacking powers. And this is what I keep telling you about. You really have to start protecting yourself. It doesn't matter that it sounds fruitless. You still got to do it. Because these people will lie. They'll make stuff up to get you in trouble. And what they're doing now is even worse. If they find you have property, they make stuff up to get your property in trouble. And they want more, with this lack of arrest and the witness before a judge that they will do wrong, and with no arrest, they want more power to do this more. The Judicial Advisory Panel Monday quietly approved a rule change that will broaden FBI's hacking authority despite fears raised by Google that the amended language represents a monumental constitutional concern. I won't talk to you about the hypocrisy about Google doing that. It's just another cover. They want you to think that they're doing it all right. These are turning out to be. We're surrounded by criminals, folks. I can't help but look at it that way. Until I see better, until I see more, yakking about how it's not a monumental constitution on a rule committee and having it to go through just tells me that they're just trying to set you up to make like this is all okay and everybody's doing what they can to stop this nonsense and nobody's doing anything actually. The Judicial Conference Advisory Committee on Criminal Rules voted 11-1 to modify an arcane federal rule that allows judges more flexibility in how to approve search warrants for electronic data, according to the Justice Department spokesman. Enough said. When you see the judge not arrest these FBI people for whatever, I mean, there's all kinds I would come up with about what a liar, perjury on the stand, false evidence, false setting up. They already know they're not supposed to be doing a false setup to get evidence, a false investigation, misappropriation of public funds. All this stuff, a judge doesn't come up and say something about that, you're looking at collusion, and you see the judges are right in on it. We sued the Bar Association, the political party, say you have established a system that is no longer a Republican form of representative government, and it was crickets on their part. It was the best answer, one of the best answers I could have ever heard. It shocked me. That's okay, I'll get past this one. They agreed that is what happened. And here's just evidence of the fact that this is all collusion. Hacker detained by FBI on tweeting about airplane software vulnerabilities, I thought was pretty fascinating. They want to expand their hacking. Well, they got software that's looking at people who are doing stuff. Chris Roberts was detained by FBI agents on Wednesday as he was deplaning his United States flight, which had just flown from Denver to Syracuse. While on board the flight, he tweeted a joke about taking control of the plane's engine indicating and crew alerting system, which provides flight crews with information in real time about the aircraft's functions, including temperatures of various equipment, fuel flow and quantity and oil pressure in the tweet, which is almost, it's just a bunch of numbers and letters. The FBI was able to decipher this tweet, which was in numbers and letters of, well, let me just read one up. Box, IFE, ISCE, SATCOM. That's all has to do with their satellite communications and other things on the airplane. That the FBI has I'm sure, bots interpreting every tweet, that they were able to pick this out, and they questioned him on an airplane over what he is saying is a joke, which appears maybe to be the seed drop for us that it can be done. It has been being able to be done. I would almost anticipate now an airplane going in somewhere. Don't know. Maybe answers MH370. Who knows? The point is that the FBI wants greater hacking ability, and they also have, they don't have to hack this one. They just have bots that are looking, and they can make up whatever they want, and they went after this guy. Why would they do that unless that can happen? The point is the FBI is all over the place. This is the government all over this stuff. You're going to have to start thinking about how that works. And they want greater powers, and more rules are given to the judges to allow violations to occur to you in a country that deems you to have no rights, on a country the prosecutors of which are immune and can indict a ham sandwich and get a conviction out of you over it and steal your stuff as well. These people and these abilities should be a little bit terrifying. That again, and I appreciate some people did sign up to Talks or Jitsi. I'm on either, but I'm noticing that some people have signed up. If you're not getting yourself into encryption and to keep some of your stuff quiet, and partially maybe going through Tor browsers and or whatever, and setting up different systems. And I understand the problem of the military funding Tor, but I look at it this way, that a lot of people looking into it haven't found the vulnerabilities in that, and the military actually needs to be identity proof themselves. That I'd rather try that and things like Talks that are encrypted, or Whonix, which is a whole operating system that's got a double and triple wrap around you, than to just go out and give a talk on Skype or just hand them the stuff in the tweets and be absent about this ability of the government to grab you. That I found a little link. It says encryption works, how to protect your privacy in the age of NSA surveillance. I won't talk more about that. It's just a little thing you can go read. It's stuff that's available that we need to protect ourselves on, and how to leak to the Intercept. This one actually caused me some concern. The Intercept telling people how to leak information to them, but we know this was bought. This is like funded by that Omidyar dude. How much is he not a contractor really to the government at some level? All these guys, Snowden, all these guys are just looking like a big question to me, and have. But these people are telling you how to securely give them information, which I appreciate. But I wanted to pass this out because I'm saying, if you're a whistleblower or you're someone with some real stuff, how do you know they're not part of the problem? So take what they offer and see what it takes to be safe. Be very cautious of dealing with these people that when you look in their history, it's just a big question mark. And I don't know if that's going to mean anything anyway, because a long time ago, I still haven't got it up. I'm going to read it right now, finally. Way back in March 11th, there was a little story that went through. I thought that was pretty serious, in that I think that these new phones, they are concentrated evil. There's no other way. The technology is fantastic, fabulous stuff. It's evil. Siri is recording everything you say. Now, I don't know too much about these things, but Apple's, I think their iPhone has something called Siri in it, and I had opportunity to be terrorized by one of these little concentrated blocks of evil when it started talking. And I didn't ask it anything. It was responding to me, and it had to record what I said in order to know what I said. And I know it's connected up to the internet before I got there. I know it went to the cell phone. I'm thinking, holy smokes. This is a scary device that now it's out. Siri, that program, I found out, that program just happened to be around the phone and it was doing this. They go, get that the heck out of here. I don't want to have it around me. Several stories of accusations have been going around Apple's Siri and other voice-to-text services asserting that they are recording what you say and that people actually listen. You think, folks? Now I say accusations because many people are questioning the veracity of some of these claims, mainly those from Reddit users and Fallen Mist. However, they aren't accusations. The iOS terms clearly state that Apple will record what you say and may send it to subsidiaries and their agents. It goes on to add that they will help record the names of your contacts, your relationships with them, in-home devices, and sometimes your location. I don't find this surprising at all, so it's interesting to see some people questioning whether this is happening. We are carrying little tracking devices around with us that record what we say, and the worst part is that we all clicked I agree. And guess what, folks? I didn't. And I apparently am recorded wherever I go that those little pieces of evil, concentrated evil, are. This confirmation, this is the privacy statement that I told you caused me to stop using Skype. Yeah, go ahead. Keep using those tracking devices that record everything you say, and one day in the future you wonder how'd they make this story up against me? Why am I sitting in this prison cell? Why are they stealing my stuff? Where's my house? And they don't have to tell you, because it's not your stuff now. Smartphone tracking crackdown leaves consumers in the dark. You want to keep being connected to this digital world, big data? Federal regulators cracked down on secret smartphone tracking of shoppers on Thursday, but the end result is that covert tracking can continue and customers may never know it. Well, there's your Siri program in action. The non-privacy privacy statement. Fascinating what we allow to ourselves and continue and don't say anything about it. Your contracts, now they're going on contract law on this. Nothing to do with your Fourth Amendment right, and none of those rights. It has to do with contract law. You agreed. You clicked I agree. And you pay for the privilege. How stupid are we, folks? How stupid are we? So be careful if you're texting on your little Siri phone, talking to yourself, and you're talking to the intercept, trying to send an information that's supposed to be secret. They got you before you did. They got to the point before you did. That's why these keyloggers are serious. Now we have a voice-to-text keylogger, if you will. That's before your encryption, before you get to go anywhere, before you sign up into these so-called encrypted systems. They could be completely protected, and you've already handed the information before it even got you press send. The technology is beyond us, and we keep embracing it. Now, I think it's cool. I really do. I was part of all this electronic technology chip making. I mean, there was R&D. I did that stuff long time ago. But where it has gone and what they're now doing with it is really beyond. And we're going to have to take some ownership in that. And as long as we're not, it's really crickets big time. Even those of us that are acting, trying to do the right thing and the substantive thing, maybe as this thing turns out, be thwarted before we get there. And even the checks and balances that I put in to make it difficult for anybody to track on what we're doing certainly may not be enough. But I can only keep up with so many parts. So thank you for tuning in today. I appreciate it. I hope I was able to help you. I hope I expanded more on the sugar pie mind condition and expanded it to you in any administrative capacity, and then integrated the broadcast to show you in some fashion how that on these reports and these news articles, how you can use that there's just a simple little method of approach that puts you way better position than if you just remained silent or thought you could not answer, or you thought you were smarter than the condition. It's not being smarter. It's just talking to the misapplication of the law, the mischaracterization by an official felon about what your status is. And so appreciate it. Please, if you would, donate to the worldtruth.org or sign up for the social network there that's available, because that's where the servers are going out. RealLibertyMedia.com is where we got the Blogcaster and Grimner's page, and then UCY.tv and all the listeners there, and they support me by putting up the YouTube for this. I don't do any of that. That's all on them and the FM broadcast and whoever else is out there. Appreciate it. Stay tuned, and thank you to Grimner for the music right before the broadcast. That's kind of nice to hear as I'm building on the program. Take care. Talk to you later.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
Opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.